Hello and welcome to Off the Fence, a podcast where we deconstruct difficult decision making to try to figure out what keeps us stuck, but more importantly, how do we get unstuck? I'm your host, Karen Covey, a former divorce lawyer, mediator, and arbitrator turned coach, author, and entrepreneur. With me today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Jonathon Aslay. And Jonathon is one of America's leading midlife dating coaches. His focus has now expanded into a deeper, essential philosophy of what it truly means to love. After losing his 19-year-old son Connor in 2018, Jonathon's grief led him on a soul-searching inner journey where he became aware of an often overlooked dimension of the dating conversation. He realized that the process of dating reveals the most common emotional health issue faced by many singles today seeking a partner: a distressing lack of self worth, self regard, and self love. Today, Jonathon is on a mission of encouraging both men and women to love themselves fully with the new book, What the Heck is Self-Love Anyway? Packed with fun, engaging spiritual and personal growth practices, and his dynamic midlife love mastery mentorship program that inspires hundreds of people daily around the world. Jonathon, welcome to the show.
Hey, I'm excited to be here, Karen.
I'm excited to have you here. But before we dive into all the questions I can't wait to ask you, tell me a little bit about your backstory. Why become a dating coach or a midlife dating coach at that?
Well, nobody goes to college and says, I'm going to become a dating and relationship coach. Well, I mean, might go to become a therapist or psychologist and that sort of thing. Many people who do this fall into it by accident. And I'll give you the Cliff Note version of it. Um, After turning 40 and going through a divorce back in, 15, 20 years ago, 18 years ago now, um, I found myself back in the dating marketplace, and there was this thing called online dating where you could simply punch in what you want and someone would magically appear. And I went out on a date with one woman and we had a good time, nice date, but something wasn't right. And then I went out with another woman, nice date, something wasn't right. And this went on and on and on. And in 1 year, I had over 100 internet dates.
Whoa. Or when you say internet dates, do you mean dates from the internet where you
Yeah.
actually physically met the person?
Yes, I'm sorry. Let me clarify that. 100 physical first dates. I was literally having two a week, which wasn't, I mean, you can get to 100, pretty quickly with two a week. And after about a year, I realized that the common denominator was me. And right at that time, the movie The Secret came out, and I was like, oh, totally into the law of attraction and wanting to understand myself. And I'm going, if I'm the common denominator, maybe I need to work on myself. But what was interesting, Karen, was I wasn't just dating some of these women, I was communicating with women all over the country, talking on the phone. It was both an addiction on my part. I was addicted to the communication and the feminine energy, but it was also therapy for me. And what I mean by therapy is talking to someone about their relationship problems, talking about my relationship problems became therapy. But what was also happening is I was making friends, and I had communicated with so many women. I didn't even meet many of them, but they would call me up and say, "Hey, Jonathon, would you look at this? Would you look at my dating profile? Can you give me the man's point of view and help me make it better?" And I'm like, "Sure." So sure enough, I tell him, move this picture, do this, write this. And then a month later, I'd get a call. Jonathon, I've got this date with this guy. Will you look at his profile and tell me what you think about him from the male perspective? And I go, bing, a light bulb hit my head or went off in my head. I could start. I'm actually doing this as a hobby. How about do this for a business? And 15 years ago, I put up a cheesy website. And back then, websites were kind of the Wild West, 15, 20 years ago. And I say it was cheesy, but somehow I got recognized publicly. I mean, I got asked to do radio shows and give my advice on relationship. And I'm like, I'm so green. So I began studying every book behind me. I started to read the Gottmans. I read, every book I could get my hands on dating and relationships because this was turning into my new profession. And
Mhm.
15 years later, I'm actually considered one of the top, midlife. And midlife, the reason why I focus on midlife is I was such a broken man. 15 years ago, I went through a divorce, lost my high end corporate job, got wiped out in the market crash of 2008 and 9. I was such a broken man that I gave advice to women about understanding that divorced, broken guy. And so it evolved from my woundedness, but I was giving advice based on using me as the template of what oftentimes happened. And as a divorce attorney, you know, divorce particularly is the unraveling of the tapestry of our life with another human being. And there are so many emotional ramifications that are oftentimes undiagnosed, unrealized. It's a domino effect. And many people are hurting after a divorce, and they immediately put themselves out in the dating marketplace going, "Oh, you'll save me, you'll complete me." And what happens is there's a lot of people going through trauma bonding and that sort of thing. Anyways, I draw attention to all of that, and that's what I do in my work.
Wow. I have so many questions. I don't
Yeah.
even know where to start. Okay, so let me
Okay.
let me start here. Just because I know that there have got to be women out there who really want to know, what does a man look for in a woman's online dating profile? What should they put out there? What should they care about?
Well, so men are visual creatures. So I'm just gonna be blunt. We're gonna look at your photographs more than we are gonna read your essay, just on face value. So, I mean, from a dating perspective, putting together quality photographs will yield much better results. As a as a man who reviews women's profiles daily, I can tell you, Karen, that 98 out of 100 women's profiles are crappy. The photographs are poor. They've got poor energy. I mean, I'm just telling you, very few out of 100 are actually good quality. Most of them are mediocre or poor. They just put
Wow.
poor effort. Well, because there's almost this resistance to, it's like almost someone who wants a job but doesn't really want the job. Like they send in a resume, but it's not this amazing resume. It's like, yeah, I'll just mail the resume. I don't care. And there's so much ambivalence in the effort for online dating. And by the way, I just said that about women. Men are equal in this percentage. Men and women equally make mediocre effort. And what saddens me, Karen, I habitually talk about this. I constantly talk about this. And yet, most people would rather be rigid and say, oh, I'm just going to do it my way.
Wow.
Even
That's
women, people that pay me for this advice, they still are so rigid because they don't believe that they have to put quality effort to be seen.
wow. That is amazing to me because I know one of the big fears that people have going through a divorce is, oh my, I have to date now. I have to, and the way that, I mean, you know better than I do. What are the stats on how many couples meet online these days?
Over 65% of all new couples happen through an online connection.
So with that statistic, I mean, I would think that anyone going into that dating pool would put some time and effort into their profile, right?
Yeah,
Because
but there's this almost cognitive dissonance, or there's almost this resistance because they're angry that they have to do it this way. I'm when I use the
ah,
word angry, they're resentful, they're angry, their arrogance even comes out. I shouldn't have to do it this way, so it's okay if I do something mediocre. There's almost this unconscious bias, is what I meant, not cognitive dissonance, but this unconscious bias that I'm just going to put out mediocre. That way, if I get mediocre results, it's almost the subconscious is saying, oh, that just proves that this isn't the way I should be doing it.
wow. That's a real revelation. I mean, I personally have not been in the dating pool for quite a long time. Um, but but this just fascinates me because when I was getting out of dating when I met my husband, um, online dating was starting to be a bigger and bigger thing, right? So This is just all amazing to me. All right, you said what men look at first with the woman is her picture. What do women look at from men's profiles? Because you've seen both ways. You've worked with both sides.
Yeah, I
What
work with
should a
both men.
man do for his profile to make it appealing to women?
So, I mean, men and women both are going to look at the photographs, and there is a biased. The hard part as we age, and again, I work in midlife, which I say is after baby making years and before retirement. There's almost this age discrimination that both men and women participate in. Women, because we no longer look like we did when we're in our 20s and 30s. We don't have the physical shapes or the hair or the tight skin, that sort of thing. So women are we judge. We human beings can be rather superficial. We judge based on looks, and women judge based on looks as well. If they like someone, then they're going to want to read the profile. And by the way, people who are genuinely looking for a life partner will also read what's in the profile. So what's written in the profile matters equally. No, not equally, but it matters, you know,
Two.
commensurately with the
Yeah.
photographs. Okay. So so a well-written profile garners better results. Well curated photographs garners better results. And better results meaning you're just going to be seen out of the crowd. It's like okay, you're at a football stadium. If everyone wearing black and someone wears red, they're going to be seen in the crowd. So that's the way you want to approach the online process. And I feel like I've been preaching this for 15 years. I mean, like, it saddens me that I have to keep repeating this. Like, it's like, if you want a job, if you had your ideal dream job, wouldn't you put together your ideal dream resume?
You would think.
And sadly, when I say 98 out of 100, that's true for men and women alike. It's mediocre at best.
Wow. So let's say somebody is willing to go the extra mile. They want to be the 2%, right? They
Yeah,
want to stand out. What kinds of things that should they emphasize? Because from what I understand, I do have children who are in the dating pool,
yeah,
and it's like everything kind of sounds the same. It's like I like long walks on the beach and romantic evenings and blah blah. Like it all kind of sounds generic after a while. So what do you say?
sure. This is tricky because most humans aren't naturally gifted writers, okay? So one thing I've done for my clients is I cut and paste all the best profiles that I've ever read, which are usually stories, which are usually humorous stories, which usually says something with some meat and some robustness. So, in fact, I'll just share with you what the first sentence on my profile says, just to give you an example. And it starts like this. Imagine we just walked out of a personal development, self help, and spiritual retreat. And we can't wait to share with each other how we felt and all the ahas we experienced. Okay. Now, what I did there is I just painted a picture of a story of what it'd be like to be together, because personal development, self help, and spiritual is like the big thing in my life. And I painted a story. Painted a picture. You want to paint a picture of what it's like to be together. You want to share maybe some details. You can even be granular and go, I just imagine that we're going to go to Poncho's for dinner to grab a margarita on a Sunday afternoon. Okay, so you get granular, you name a restaurant that matters to you, and you describe what it's like to do this together. That's going to garner more better results because you've just opened up the creative centers of a person's mind, versus I like long walks on the beach, holding hands, candlelight dinner, yada yada yada. Paint a picture that's real, that's in your life.
So what would you say? I think I know the answer to this, but I'm
Okay.
interested in hearing your perspective. What would you say to the person who says, yeah, but what if this person doesn't like the same, like, what if I paint this picture, isn't that going to turn some people off? What if I lose the right guy because he doesn't like ponchos?
Well, first off, and then that we'll kind of let's be real. If someone hated that restaurant is going to say no to you for that reason, there's a lot of other issues within that human being's psyche that you've just dodged a bullet. Okay. I know there's a fear of being so specific and granular, as I'm saying, but the truth is, somebody who maybe isn't doesn't do that would go, wow, maybe I'll try that. In other words, you've just created an opportunity for to do something new, even though they haven't done it. And that demonstrates flexibility, open-mindedness, curiosity, spontaneity, all these great, juicy, delicious qualities within a human being. If they read something that they haven't done and go, wow, I'd like to try that. So now, the reason why you're making it specific and local is that ideally you want to date from a proximity perspective within your backyard, ideally. And let me explain why. Um, you know, Proximity breeds continuity, and continuity meaning doing things regularly together. Proximity breeds doing things together, continuity, and continuity builds trust. A lot of people today are spending an inordinate amount of time. Did I say that
You
properly?
did.
Inordinate amount of time on their devices. They're just texting one another. They're texting, "How's your day going? Did you have a good day? I hope you had a good day. Was your day good? Tell me about your day." And it's not real communication other than finding about specifics about the day. But the problem is, and Esther Perel, who wrote the book Mating in Captivity, did a great YouTube video on something known as artificial intimacy. Artificial intimacy. Many people today are spending more time communicating via their devices than they are face to face connecting with each other. And they build up this artificial connection, this artificial familiarity. And then when they actually spend time together, they find that they're misaligned with one another. So when you're writing that ponchos, you're saying, "Hey, have you been there too? Let's go together," kind of thing. Ideally, ideally, and this doesn't always have to be the case, but the closer two people live together, the greater chance their relationship success is.
That's so interesting. I love that. And I am a big fan of Esther Perel. And I'm gonna have to look up that video now because I have not seen that one. But the concept makes so much sense, this whole artificial intimacy. But how do you navigate that territory? Because if you're starting with the device, right? So you
Yeah.
meet the person on the device. Like, at what point do you say it's time to get off the device and meet in person? Do you do that right away? Or do you wait and text and go back and forth a while? But that could create the artificial intimacy you were talking about. So, where's the happy medium?
Yeah, this is a great question. And I'm going to attack it in a couple different ways because here's the thing. These days, unlike 50 to 100 and thousands of years. Okay, so let's go back in time, 100,000 years. You mated within the tribe you lived in, which was all about 30 people. And this went on for 100,000 years. And then, really, up until about 100 years ago, we pretty much mated with people that we knew. Okay. And that started to shift a little bit in the 60s, but, or the 50s and 60s. And what's happening today, when particularly if 65% of all new relationships happening online, is that we're meeting strangers. So we know nothing about them. Okay. And what's caused is a need for accelerated learning. This is a new concept
Interesting.
I've been discussing. Is it's almost created an artificial need for accelerated learning, meaning learn as much as you can about this person. This is why chemistry on the first date, if it's not there, people don't have interest to get to know you anymore or any further unless there's this instant chemistry because you're like, I don't want to invest in a person. Whereas in the past, you could have known someone for 6 months through like school or work or something. All of a sudden, chemistry was there and it ignited the relationship. So the question is, how much should you communicate? I have a rule of thumb. It's called 3, 2, 1, 3. Okay. 3, 2, 1, 3.
Okay.
I know. Okay. The three stands for no more than three text exchange, email exchanges should lead to one or two telephone calls. So get on the phone, speak, should lead to one date all in 3 weeks. Okay. So that's my rule of thumb 3, 2, 1, 3. Three email exchanges, one or two phone calls, one date, all within 3 weeks. Now you
That,
might say, but Jonathon, we live 600 miles apart. Well, then you better figure that out in that context, is my suggestion.
unless you want a long distance relationship where you never see each other, but that's its own issue.
Well, and a lot of people are choosing long distance relationships and they do it very, ambivalent, ignorant, without intention, because they're thinking in the bubble, the bubble of chemistry, and they're not thinking of the big picture. So they rarely ever discuss how are we going to take this distance from long to short with a genuine plan because they're amped up on chemistry oftentimes. And I didn't get to say this earlier, Karen, but chemistry is not an indicator of relationship success. It's needed, but that in and of itself is not an indicator of relationship success.
Okay, say more about that.
Okay. Um, okay, so I want you to think about it like an iceberg. Okay, above the water line is the top of the iceberg is chemistry. Below the water line, and this takes time to learn, it's shared values, shared vision, lifestyle compatibility, and this is the tricky part, emotional maturity. We have a population of human beings that are rather radically emotionally wounded, and worse, have poor relationship skills. How do I know this? Because one out of first marriages end in divorce, 65 out of 6 out of 10 second marriages end in divorce, second marriages end in divorce, and 7 out of 10 third marriages end in divorce. That's an indicator we aren't good at this yet.
Agreed. But if you listen to people of a certain age, people in middle age and beyond, so we'll just call it 45 and up for the
Yes.
moment, okay?
Perfect. Perfect.
So for people who are in that demographic, because I happen to fall in the 45 and up
Yeah,
demographic as well,
me
we
too.
all think that we understand relationships in a level that the young people don't. They're the ones who can't communicate. They're the ones who've got the nose in the phone all the time. They're the ones who are all geeked out on tech and don't know how to have a real relationship, but we do. Okay, what would you say about that?
Well, I'll be blunt and say you're delusional. Most humans, I'm going to be very granular here. And let's talk about men, for example. Most humans do a very poor job identifying their emotions, but more importantly, being able to articulate your emotions to another human being. But let's take it even a step further, articulating it in a way that can be seen and heard and understood by another human being, provided that they're capable of receiving. I am being blunt here. We have an emotionally dysfunctional population of human beings. That doesn't mean that they don't pay their bills on time, doesn't mean that they're not ambitious, doesn't mean that they're irresponsible. But from an emotional level, we are infants in many ways. How do I know this? First year marriages end at 50%, second end at 60%, third end at 70%. That speaks volumes. And it's usually this. Karen, you go into any therapist office, couples therapist office, and this is what happens. She points the finger at him and he points the finger at her.
Yep,
I mean, this is
yep.
significant percentage of the time. Rarely do people look in the mirror and say, remember I said I went on 100 dates and I realized I'm the common denominator?
Mm-hmm.
Very small percentage of human beings are actually deeply introspective and take ownership. Now, I'm saying it's a small percentage. I'm not saying it's zero, but most humans aren't aware that they are the common denominator.
So, how do people go? All right, assuming your statistics are close to being right, and I'm sure they
It's
are,
anecdotal, but yeah,
whatever, right. But so that a significant, let's call it a significant portion, if not, definitely the majority of people are emotionally immature or not,
yeah,
they don't uh, know enough about their own emotions to express them clearly and
yeah.
yada, yada, yada. Um, what to do? I mean, like if I was in the dating pool right now and I heard this, I'd be like, slip my wrists.
It's interesting. Can I tell you a quick little story? And it relates
Sure.
to divorce attorney. So I remember at one point in my divorce, which was I don't know, 2007, so that was a long time ago. Um, we went to divorce court. We had to have a hearing for something, and when I got to the courthouse, it was the morning. We were the fourth docket, I believe they call it
Okay.
docket,
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
the fourth case to be heard. So, but we had to be there before ever. So I heard the case before, three cases ahead of us, and it was fascinating to witness the infighting going on between the couples and the arguments and so and I'm sharing this because you have sat in court, I'm sure, multiple times witnessing this. And I realized that I thought to myself, this is we everybody should spend a week in divorce court before they ever get married as a way to reverse engineer. If we know these are the reasons why, then what can we do to avoid it? So my point is there are fantastic books. In fact, the Gottmans have something, the Gottman Institute, John and Julie Gottman have interviewed over 40,000 couples and found the common denominators of most frustrations in relationship. In fact, they call it the four horsemen of the apocalypse, which is contempt, criticism, defensiveness, and stonewalling. So what I would invite everybody to do, and remember you started with sharing my bio. I wrote a book about self-love.
Mm-hmm.
So my invitation for everyone is to do, know themselves, know your fears, know your insecurities, know your limiting beliefs, know your negative patterns, know your judgments of others. Like become self-aware, love yourself, number one. Number two, study relationship books. This is what I habitually talk about on my YouTube channel. Study the mechanics of a relationship. And I'm only asking people to invest 1 hour a day for the next couple months. That's it. 1 hour a day, reading a book, learn about yourself, invest in yourself. Because the better prepared you are when you're in the dating marketplace, the better results you're going to have. So invest a little bit in yourself first, kind of understand who you really are, find your nooks and crannies, and then learn about relationships. But I say this out loud, but I would venture to say that 80-90% of people go, gee, what's the definition of insanity? If I keep doing it my way over and over and over again, I'm going to get the same exact results. And I'm being rhetorical here. Um, just like George from Seinfeld, try the opposite and see how that works.
Yeah. It's interesting, and I just so resonate with so much of what you've said. It's like people want it starts in the marriage. They want the other person to change, not them.
Yeah.
And then when you get into the dating pool, it's just more of the same, more of the same, more of the same. So really, I think your advice is well taken that you start here. You start with yourself. And I know that you're really deep into self-love now. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Tell your listeners what your more recent explorations into self-love have revealed and, what they can do to deepen their own sense of who they are and, their own self-love.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I appreciate that. And as you shared in my bio, when my son passed away, I was giving his eulogy and I remembered I stopped in the middle of it and I said to everyone, look, we can grieve with suffering or we can grieve with love. And what I meant by that is that I chose to celebrate his life. And I chose emotionally to just just fill my heart up with as much love for him as I could possibly do. But what I was really was filling my heart up with my own love. And what I mean by that is we human beings can be so cruel to ourselves. Self crucifixion, self doubt, self judgment. I mean, the list goes on and on. I think we are the cruelest to ourselves oftentimes first in our heads.
Mm-hmm.
And so for the last 15 years, I've immersed myself. So let me explain, let me backtrack. When I went through a divorce, I lost my high-end corporate job. I got wiped out in the marketplace, and I was going through a divorce. I was an emotional train wreck, as I shared earlier. I was that. The reason why I coach women on dysfunctional men is because I was that guy. It's the personal development, self-help, spiritual work, and therapy that I've done that puts scaffolding, emotional scaffolding around me. So by the time my son passed away, I didn't collapse. And by the way, I've met so many people now who have lost a child and they literally have collapsed and not come back from it. Self-love is all of that scaffolding I was just describing through personal development, self-help, spiritual work, and therapy to to really kind of learn how to regulate your emotions, to navigate your emotions, to understand what they mean, to not allow them to engulf you, like I talked about with suffering before. Um, Self love is your self worth, your self confidence, your self reliance, your self esteem. And it's not a destination. It's not that you get, I believe you become fully actualized 7 seconds before you die. That's when it happens in my mindset. And I'm being tongue in cheek. It's a work in progress. Um, but the benefit is that I believe doing inner work creates more joy in a person's life. I think we're a society here in the United States in particular. We believe things equals joy. And most people who there's a lot of people that have nothing and are completely happy. Um, so I think once we really begin to love ourselves, that's where real joy resides.
That's so interesting. And I love that perspective, right? I really do. Putting it in the context, though, of somebody who's just gotten divorced, right?
Yeah.
So, do you have a rule of thumb? Like, how long does this process take before you're whole enough to jump back in the dating pool? Because I've had clients who, you know, the ink was just barely dry on the divorce papers and they were already out in the dating world, right? I'm not sure that, I don't know if that's the best thing, but I guess it depends on the person. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
That's a great question. So I think there's going to be degrees. I think the more contentious the divorce, number one, most often the more time that needs to be healed. The more there's anger towards the other person, the longer it is going to take to heal. And what humans often do is they immediately go find a replacement that, that line from Jerry Maguire, you complete me. Like I've got this hole inside of me. I got to go get it filled right away. Oftentimes that's codependency being filled. There's no set timeline, but I will say this: the more anger you harbor towards your previous partner, the more resentment you harbor, the more contentious a relationship is, the longer it's going to take to heal. And ultimately, one of the big functions within self love is forgiveness. And forgiveness simply means forgiving love. Forgiving love. This is my interpretation. This isn't I didn't make this up. I heard this from someone else, but this is the way it isn't about absolving somebody or anything like that. But as Brene Brown says, forgiveness is for yourself, not, it's not necessarily for the other person. When we can approach life and from a place of forgiving love, we are better prepared to engage in love with somebody else. See, sadly, though, Karen, most people engage in transactional relationships, not deeply coveted, loving relationships. There's usually a transaction involved. And I don't mean monetary per se, but let me reframe that, not transactional. It's conditional. You do this, I do this. There's a lot of conditions, a lot of expectations. There are plenty of couples that have genuine unconditional love and genuine, um, they come from their heart. But many people sadly are blocked from their heart because they're harboring a lot of pain. And then they go have somebody else go fill that. Here in the United States, we are suckling on the nipple of, I need you to love me so I can feel good about myself. We are a society here suckling on that, sadly speaking. And I can only speak for United States because I know in other parts of the world, there's just a different energy that has to do with their environment versus here. But to answer your question, there's no set, timeline. It oftentimes depends on how hurt you are.
I agree 100%. And I also really appreciate that you highlighted that the amount of time that it is going to take any person to heal is directly proportional to how much anger and hurt and pain they're holding on to from their divorce. Because
Yeah.
you are just feeding into what I work so hard with my clients not to do. It's like, why do you want that amicable divorce? Why is it better to be prepared to educate yourself to go through this in the
Yeah.
least destructive way possible? Because when you do that, you're in the best position to start your new life and be healthy and whole, right? But the challenge is people go through the divorce and they want to hang on to that anger. They want to hang on to that hurt because they want to hurt their spouse. They don't want to be seen for giving love to someone who clearly doesn't love them and may have walked out on them and,
Yeah.
whatever the story is. And so it becomes really difficult for them to let go of all of that, and they think that because they don't want to let their spouse off the hook.
Yeah, unfortunately, there's an expression, hurt people hurt people. Because when you're hurting, it's going to bleed everywhere in your life. That's why forgiveness, and it's very difficult to do. I'm going to say self-love is not for the faint of heart. This is like it. And by the way, it almost requires ninja level effort. I'm being very sincere here. You have sat in court, I'm sure, hundreds of times, and you've witnessed almost the gutter of anger. In fact,
Mm-hmm.
divorce court is probably one of the melting pots where there's the deepest anger amongst couples.
True.
Um, and that's sad. And so learning real forgiveness, learning real compassion, learning real love, the sooner we get there as a society and as an individual human being, I think this is eventually where our, world will flourish. And, just starts with one person. And I say this as a man who had a contentious divorce, and I was in a relationship with a therapist, and she said, mend the relationship with your ex. And little by little, little by little, little by little, little by little, I just kept being more kinder, gentler, loving, compassionate. And not that, like we're best friends, her and I, it's not that. But all it takes is one person. I know that's hard to hear if you think the other person genuinely hates you. But I'm going to tell you something. You're not doing it for them, you're doing it for yourself. I felt better giving love even in the face of rejecting, like resentment from that. It just feels better when we give love. That's
A
how
hundred,
I view it anyway.
100%. And that, I think that brings us kind of full circle where,
Yeah.
starting in love, going through the dating, ending in love, it all makes so much sense. Do you have any other words of wisdom that you want to share with the audience before we call it a wrap?
Oh my God, I like have 1,000 things. You know what? Um, I always look at it this way. Life is a journey. I mean, I genuinely look at it this way. And there's no right or wrong, there's no, every person's experience is unique. I genuinely believe that if we can embrace real compassion for ourselves, real love for ourselves, and not from an arrogant, narcissistic, self-centric way. I
Right.
mean, just, as I said earlier in this broadcast, we are our worst critics and enemies and that sort of thing. The more we infuse ourselves with love, it's an antidote to suffering. So, self-love is a vaccination to suffering in my purview.
That is a beautiful way to wrap this up and to end the interview. But before we do, one last question. Where can people find you if they want to get your book, if they want to check out your work, if they want to find you? Where can they do that?
Well, if you're watching the video, my name is listed there, so you can simply plug that into Google and you can get to my website. I also have a YouTube channel where I've got almost 200,000 followers. I record 5 videos a week talking about dating, mating, or relating from that midlife perspective. I usually have live videos too, so you can hop on and I actually do live interviews and that sort of thing. So either my YouTube or my website, or you can, once you put in my name, you can find all my social media and all that good stuff.
Wow. And I would really encourage anyone who's watching, anyone who's listening to do exactly that. If you are in the dating pool or you're about to be in the dating pool, you definitely want to check out your Jonathan's videos, his book, all the things, because this is advice from somebody who's been there, done that. So, Jonathan, thank you so much. And if you are, again, if you're watching or listening, please, if you like what you heard, if you want to hear more like this, more interviews like this, give it a thumbs up, like, subscribe, and I look forward to talking with you again next time.